It might seem like a wonder to some who perhaps may be joining us on this episode for the very first time, why it is that we need a guide to happiness. Isn't happiness something so obvious? Is it not something that we have experienced and enjoyed all our lives? Do we need someone to teach us about happiness? I mean, seriously? Maybe some thoughts that come in people's minds. And that is perfectly reasonable. It is perfectly reasonable because throughout our lives, during our formative years, and as we have evolved, and as we've grown up and become adults and learnt about the world around us, we seem to have picked up what happiness means to us along the way. Now, it is obvious though that people do all sorts of different things in the name of happiness and for the sake of happiness. But it is also obvious that people don't seem to be content with the things that they do. And this is why every day people are always trying to do something different, trying out something new. A new experience people always like to have. If there's a new restaurant opening up in town, then the next question that comes to mind is, when can I go and try that out as well? If you see a new item of food appear in a menu, or perhaps a new aisle in the supermarket, then you want to try that out as well. If there's a new flavor in which you can buy ice cream, you'd want to try that out as well. If there's a new TV channel, you'd want to watch that as well. A new TV program, you'd want to watch that as well. If there's a new stage drama, you'd want to go and see that. A new song, a new album, you'd want to download that and listen to it. And this is why from time to time you get various hits. It becomes very popular. And then, as popular as these things might become, something we know for certain is they don't live for very long. Very soon, something new turns up in the block, and then that becomes the new hit. So you see, this thing that we experience as happiness, I think it would be fair to say, has been very incomprehensible, very difficult to understand. We always seem to be going after it, but never seem to be able to completely, fully achieve it. It seems to be very evasive, like an oasis in the middle of a desert. You keep on going, it looks like it's there, so you don't ever give up, but you just keep on going, because no matter how far you go, you're never going to reach it. It's a bit like a mirage in the desert. You keep on going in the hope that you will reach it. It looks like it's there, and from afar you can see all sorts of evidence that there's water in the distance. So you keep on striving to get there, but no matter how far you travel, all that is left at the end of it is effort. You're tired, exhausted, fatigued, and a never-ending hope simply keeps pushing you, driving you there, but something you never achieve. Is happiness something like that? Is it a mirage? Are we all going after a mirage? I think it's high time we start to ask these questions of ourselves. So, today, as we take another step forward on our journey, trying to figure out what's going on with us, what's happening with our lives, and how it is that we can perhaps, hopefully, somehow achieve a happiness that is never ending, a happiness that we don't really need to work hard for, a happiness that is ours and ours to keep. Let's take another step on that journey today with this talk. And before we commence, let us take a moment to pay veneration to the Lord Buddha, and we will continue from there on. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, is happiness a mirage? What do you think? You've strived for it throughout your life to get there, to achieve it. But did you ever actually achieve it? Have you? For instance, if you are happy, if you are content, if you are satisfied, would you need to keep on trying to be happy? Have you never had those days where you feel it's just a great day today? Everything's just going to plan. It's a wonderful day. The weather's great, right? And things seem to be just all going like clockwork. Everything you've planned is just going smoothly. And then you feel, today is a wonderful day. It's a perfect day. And I'm just so happy. And I'm just in a state of pure bliss. Almost every one of us have had days like that in our life. However, as much as we have days like that, we can be sure of one thing. Soon after, things will go haywire. This experience of pure bliss can be turned upside down the following day, or perhaps even a few moments after we have had that initial thought. So, it then becomes evident to us that the happiness that we seem to have accepted and that we have learned to live with is not something that is ours to keep. It is very transient, ever-changing. And so we seem to be always one step behind happiness. As soon as you achieve it, it seems to move a step forward. And then you run after it. And the moment you grab hold of it, it seems to escape. So you're always one step behind it, and it's always one step ahead. It's like the carrot tied to the donkey. It's always one step ahead, and the donkey is always one step behind it. But because the donkey can see the carrot, it never stops walking towards it. And so, at the end of any amount of time, all that has happened is the donkey tires out. It's exhausted. It's fatigued. Because it has made great effort to walk towards the carrot, being ever hopeful that it's one day going to be able to taste this carrot that smells so delicious. But never does the carrot get eaten, because never does the carrot fall into the donkey's hands. Is happiness something like that? We need to take a moment to think about this for ourselves, because, well, to be fair, we don't want to think of ourselves as donkeys now, do we? If you recall, in the previous week, we discussed a distinction between happiness and pleasure. Do you remember? I proposed to you, let us consider happiness to be something that is unconditional. Now, I'll be the first to admit it is not something that I have explained to you as yet in full detail. And right now you may even be suspicious, or you might be doubtful if something like that could ever exist. An unconditional happiness, happiness that is not conditioned, happiness that does not depend on various internal or external factors. Is that even possible? And it's quite right that you question that, because throughout your life, I think it would be fair to say, you may never have experienced that sort of happiness. We took several examples in our previous talk, and I invited you to think along the same lines. And what became evident to us was that whenever we have experienced happiness in our lives, it has always required various factors to come in line, to organize themselves, with our effort or without our effort. Normally, usually with our effort. But nevertheless, it has always required something to go to plan. Whose plan? Our plan. Something to be in the right order, right in line. just enough, and so on. So you see, our happiness has always been dependent rather than independent. And this is why I proposed to you last week. From here on, let us consider happiness to be something that is unconditional. And this may be pure theory right now, and that's perfectly fine. Let's leave that for now, because we will come to that very soon. And the distinction between that and the other kind of happiness, which is conditional happiness, is that, well, this is the happiness that we all so well know. Happiness that is achieved when all sorts of things happen to plan as we expect them to. Isn't that right? So, for the purpose of our discussion, I proposed let's refer to conditional happiness as pleasure. And I think you'd be perfectly fine with that, because it is quite rightly pleasure that you experience when you experience conditional happiness. So, now we have two terms, unconditional happiness or simply happiness for the purpose of our discussion, and conditional happiness or pleasure for the purpose of our discussion. So let's proceed with that. Let's discuss a little bit more in detail about what pleasure is. What does it mean to you? We've all experienced it at some point in our lives, and it is something that we always enjoy. We like to be in pleasure. We like to experience pleasure. And I think you'll agree that pleasure can be experienced both mentally and physically. Is there anything wrong with it? That's not the question that I want you to ponder about. It's not whether it's wrong or right. Because the moment you look at the world as being right or wrong, then it's difficult to understand things that way. But rather, instead of asking the question, is it right or wrong, how about we try to understand why or what pleasure is, and leave the judgment for later. Let every man be a judge unto himself, whether it's right or wrong. That is not what we need to really ponder about. But what is pleasure? Do we really understand pleasure? Or have we simply taken it for granted? Do we know how pleasure works? Do you know how pleasure works? Do you know why sometimes you feel good about certain things and you don't feel so good about others? Do you know why you have good days and bad days? Do you? Do you know why it is that you enjoy certain tastes and you don't others? Do you know why some things look pleasing to the eye, whereas others are quite distasteful? Do you know why some things please your five senses, whereas others are quite the opposite? Do you know why? Do you know yourself? Do you understand how all these things work? We do spend quite a lot of time trying to understand the world around us, don't we? Right from school to college, university, and then on as well. We've dedicated entire lifetimes to understanding the world around us, from biology to geology to geography to economics. But how little time do we really invest in understanding ourselves? This is quite interesting, because our aim, our ambition is to be happy. And it's a happiness that we feel on the inside that we are after. We want to be content, we want to be satisfied, and that is an internal experience. However, we'll seem to look for answers on the outside, don't we? Do you see the irony there? To keep ourselves happy, we seem to be looking for answers on the outside. What if the answer is really on the inside? If that were the case, then shouldn't we be spending more time learning about ourselves than perhaps the time that we put in learning about the world outside ourselves? I'm not saying we shouldn't learn about the world around us, we certainly should, but I think we spend far too little time learning about ourselves. We are far too preoccupied learning about what goes on around us that we forget to learn about what goes on inside of us. The Buddha's guide to happiness is all about shifting our focus from the outside to the inside. Because the answers lie on the inside. Now, don't take anything I say for granted. I want you to be alert. I want you to be attentive. I want you to be curious. And I want you to trust me, but I would like you to verify. That's the way we should operate. Trust, but always verify. Because if you don't trust me, then you'd find it very difficult to listen to my talk until the end of it. But if you don't verify, then this is not going to be true for you. So my invitation is, be attentive, be a good student, trust, but always verify. I'm not asking for any followers. I'm asking for everyone to remain a good student. Because what is it that we are studying here? The subject of our study, the discipline that we are studying here is truly ourselves. So my invitation, my very first ask of you is really, let's take a moment to shift our focus from the outside to the inside. Pleasure. What is pleasure? We have always come to learn pleasure as something that comes to us from the outside, isn't it? I'm giving you some time to think about this. What are some things that bring you pleasure? As soon as I ask you this question, your mind's running at 100 miles an hour because there are so many things you could think of. Right from the things you like to eat, the things you like to see, the places you like to go, the people you like to be with, the things you like to do, music that you like to listen to. Songs you like to listen to, movies you like to watch, and so on. So there are lots of things that bring you pleasure, and you see, we seem to work on the premise that there are things on the outside that bring us pleasure. So if there are things on the outside that bring us pleasure, right there we have come to accept that we are recipients of pleasure from the outside world. So pleasure is something that comes to us from the outside. In other words, we are at the mercy of the world outside of us, the world around us. And by world, what I mean is not the planets, of course. What I mean is the people around us, the things around us, events that take place outside of us. It is these things, these people, these events that bring us pleasure. This is what we have come to accept. And therefore, we seem to seek refuge in a material world because you need materials to make you happy. And by materials, I don't simply mean solids, liquids, and gases. I mean simply anything, any entity that sits external to you. We seek pleasure from the outside. And that is why we need a lot of things around us. Take a moment to think about all the things that you have worked so hard to gather around yourself, to acquire, to build, to collect, the things that you like to see. You may have by now a good film collection, the things you like to listen to. You may have a very good song collection, music library, the things you like to read, a good book library. You may be a member of a particular social club where you go to socialize, have fun. So it's the people there that make you happy. The experiences you have when you are there, that makes you happy. You may have a favorite restaurant that you like to eat at. And there you will have a favorite dish. Perhaps most of you will have a favorite item of food. You may open up your cupboard and you'll see your favorite shirt, your favorite pair of trousers, your favorite dress. You have a favorite pair of shoes, a watch that you quite like, maybe a hat or a cap, maybe a piece of jewelry that is your favorite. Perhaps you like to wear your hair in a particular way. Maybe it's your makeup. You like to look a certain way. Then look at the world around you. the things that you have around you at home. You may have ornaments of various sorts. Maybe your sofa, and you're very particular about the color or the texture of the fabric. Perhaps it's your curtains. Did you choose that color? Maybe it's your carpets. Is it to match the rest of the upholstery? Maybe it's the fragrance that you have at home. Is that your choice? Did you choose it? Isn't it because you like it? Because you enjoy it? Because you find that experience pleasurable? There'll be places you like to go. You'll have a favorite park. Maybe you like to see ducks in a pond. Perhaps you like to go to the zoo. Perhaps you like to see waterfalls. Or maybe it's bird watching that is your cup of tea. See, no matter where we look, if we take a moment to study our lives, and this is what we're doing here, we are studying our lives. This is the study of ourselves. All our lives we've spent so much time studying the world around us. Now I'm inviting you to study yourself, because this is the greatest study of all. And why do I say that? It's for the very reason I explained earlier. We study the world around us for the sake of happiness, because we believe that when we become experts in those fields, we will be able to be happy. However, if happiness is something that is on the inside, that is within ourselves, then really, is it not ourselves that we need to spend a lot more time studying than the world around us? That's something for you to think about. So going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, these are things that make us happy, and these are all things on the outside. And we do them. Why? We do them because they bring us pleasure. Now again, you see, because they bring us pleasure. Or you could say because we find them pleasurable. So it is that activity. It is that sight, that sound, the smell, the taste, touch. I mean, at the end of the day, these are the 5 sensory inputs that we are going to have to distill all our experiences down to, right? Through your eyes, the only thing you can get through your eyes is sight. The only thing that you can get through your ears is sound. The only thing you can get through your nose is smell. The only thing you can get through your tongue is taste. And the only thing that you can get through your body is touch. Well, of course, there is heat, and you can experience cold. So temperature changes, pressure changes. Of course, there are receptors for all these sensory inputs. But at the end of the day, it's something that comes from the outside world, a sensory input. So no matter what we experience, they have to be distilled down to these 5 sense inputs: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So when we say that we enjoy pleasure that comes to us from the outside world, this is why you like a chocolate ice cream. Why did it have to be a chocolate ice cream? Why could it not be a vanilla ice cream? I might ask you. And then you'll say, well, it's because it is chocolate ice cream that I like. Chocolate ice cream is my favorite. Chocolate ice cream is what brings me the most amount of pleasure. In other words, what you're saying is, chocolate ice cream has pleasure in it. And it is that pleasure that you are able to absorb from it when it touches your tongue. Isn't that right? I can show you a picture drawn by a world-famous artist. And you look at that and you say, wow, that's a beautiful picture. It's a very beautiful painting. And when you close your eyes, you don't feel the same. So you open your eyes and you look at it and go, wow, that's beautiful. So you see, you can be forgiven for thinking that it is the painting that has pleasure. And then when you keep your eyes open and you look at it, this pleasure somehow transfers from the outside object to yourself. This is how we feel, this is how we think the world around us works. But is that the truth? I think it's time we start to question this. if it is the outside objects that bring us pleasure, let me ask you this question and see what comes to your mind as an answer. Let's take a simple example. I'll go back to the chocolate ice cream. How much chocolate ice cream can you have before you get fed up of it? I think we talked about this last week as well. If all you were given was pizza for breakfast, pizza for lunch, and pizza for dinner, how many days can you go before you say, that's it, I'm sick of this. Isn't there anything else I could have, please? So you see, if pleasure is in the outside object, by object I mean absolutely anything, right? So it could be food, it could be drink, it could be another experience, an event, a person, anything really. And any entity that is on the outside. Any entity that you can experience through your five senses is what I mean by an object. It's like when we studied physics. Right? An object is in motion. So that object could be absolutely anything. It could be a planet, something the size of a planet, or it could be something the size of a needle, and anything in between. So if we work on the premise that pleasure is something that comes to us from the outside world objects, then how is it that we can get fed up of certain things? Almost all things we can get fed up after some point of having it in our lives. And we go into a mode of taking things for granted, don't we? Even if it's people, for instance. See, some people we yearn to be with, we long to be with. I'll take a typical example. Let's imagine a loved one. They have decided to travel to another country for some time, let's say for a few years. Now that departure is quite painful. It could be. So you cry, you weep, and you bid your farewells, and you say, please keep in touch, please write to me, please call me, and you say your goodbyes. And so they get on a jet and then they fly. Now, after a while, of course, you want to find out how they're doing. They want to keep in touch with you as well. So, the conversations, the letters, the messages, they become very endearing. You care a lot about them. And say after a while, they say, okay, I'm coming back. Let's say it's been a few years. And now you wait for their return. And upon their return, you might even go to the airport and wait upon them for their arrival. And when they arrive, you feel an intense sensation of pleasure. I mean, all you need to do is look in the arrivals lounge, and you'll see exactly what I mean. People hug each other, they embrace each other, they hold hands, and tears of joy start to flood. But what happens after that? You take them home with you, right? And if you've been on the receiving end of this treatment, you will know exactly what I mean, as I have certainly in my life. As I said, this series of talks is based primarily on my experience in life and how I have used them to understand myself and how the world works. So, if you've been on the receiving end of this treatment, you'll know exactly what I mean. You'll be taken home and you'll be given top-class treatment, right? First-class treatment. And everyone's just so nice to you. They speak to you in just very loving words, very endearing terms, and they attend to every little need of yours to make sure you're fed, to make sure you're happy, to make sure you're content, and to make sure that everything you need is only a call away. But what happens eventually? What happens gradually? A few days pass, a few weeks pass, and what happens? Your presence becomes a very normal thing. All those niceties, all those endearing terms, all those hugs and embraces and smiles, and all the time that they had for you, very soon start to wither away. And pretty soon you become a very normal person in their presence. Your presence becomes a very normal thing to them. And then, no more first-class treatment. I'm not saying people do this because they're vile or that people do this because they're bad people. Not at all. I'm just trying to explain to you why